Oh, I see her. I'm gonna have to watch the comments.
All right, everybody, we're live here. Just give us 1 second. We're going to make sure we're live on TikTok as well. Stacy, you can let me know when we're good to go. I'll just stall a little bit here until we're live on all platforms. Make sure all the tech's good to go. We've already done an AV check. Chloe can hear me and I can hear her.
Yep.
All right. Should be live on TikTok here in just a second. You guys might be seeing this on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. All right, looks like we're good to go. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is our Friday live show. Runs every Friday at 7 Central. I'm your host, Sean Lawyer. My background is as a soldier who spent years in combat zones in Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan. Now I'm a spiritual seeker, also sometimes a guide and a coach. And I'm trying to just open up the world, have discussions with people from all walks of life, different types of spiritual philosophies, different types of religions, and see if we can all talk to each other and have a better conversation, ask great questions, and kind of come together and make the world a better place. Each week, we're going to feature a different guest or co-host. We'll be discussing a variety of spiritual topics. This week, we have Chloe, also known as Method Muse.
Hello.
Hey, Chloe. She's an emerging voice in wellness and spiritual practice, holistic approaches, and she's a professional content creator. So, Chloe, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if you can let the guests know what you're all about.
Okay, yes, my name is Chloe East. I have a really strangely spelled last name because it's French, so the RE is silent. So if you see it and you're like, that's not what it is, yes, it is. It's a really strange last name, and I come from Louisiana. So I come from the place because I grew up with generational trauma. And I mean, like, it goes far back on both sides of my family. So I started in the therapy system from a very young age, and this is the early psychiatric system because I'm 44 now. So you can imagine what it was like back when I was a kid. Advancements now have come so much further, and there are so many new ways for people to make their lives better by controlling their minds, controlling their habits, and recognizing their emotions. So today we're going to be talking about the connection between spirituality and mental health, and how, spiritual practices or different elements of spirituality can affect your mental health. So John, how do you feel about spirituality and mental health?
I have strong opinions on it, I guess. I'm pretty open about talking about it, but I mean, having come from, you have complex PTSD, so do I.
Right.
So we both come from pretty similar backgrounds, and we're almost the same age. I'm 43 or 44, so I feel like we're kind of approaching this, differently, but we have some perspective. I think that our mental health has an absolute impact on our spirituality because that mind and ego that we have, we're humans, and it's not just we're not always going to be floating in the ether, kind of all completely woo. We have to kind of balance that with how we kind of move through the real world.
I think my internet cut out there for a second.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah, we're back. We're back.
Okay. All right. So you're saying you have very strong feelings about the intersection between mental health and spirituality, and how daily spirituality affects people's mental health. And
It does.
what's
Yeah,
your
as I
experience
was
with
saying,
that?
yeah, it's we can't always be in like the woo and the metaphysical side of spirituality. I think it's important. I think it's relevant.
Hmm.
But I'm really interested in that place where the intersection of our spiritual path and our daily walk through this real world that we share with everybody else, where that happens. And so it sounds like you kind of have a similar approach. So I'm definitely
I
interested to kind of
do,
to
and
get into
it's
it.
funny because growing up, my family was hyper religious. I mean, extreme and almost bizarre, like cultish, and they would change all the time. We would change churches all the time, change faiths all the time, just over and over. And each time it was a new one. It's like, no, you have to follow this. And it's like, what? You just said last week that it was something else. No, you listen to what I say now. Now I've changed my mind. So, it was very confusing for me. So I'm like, okay, so I'm in this thing called life, and I'm with these people who seem to have no idea what's going on. And I have no idea what's going on. It's really scary. It's terrifying as a kid, especially, but I think for anyone, for even grown-ups, I mean, to just have this question of what's going on, you know, and to have the comfort of some kind of answer that you feel good about, I think is really important. But, when I was young, I just didn't have that. So I kind of just went searching around. So I'd say I've really been researching, different faiths probably since I was a teenager, like from a really young age, like trying to understand philosophy and psychology and religions. And then even in college, I studied religion for a while and just tried to understand, why do people believe what they believe and what's true? What is truth? What does that mean? You know, and it's a lot more complex than it seems. I think because it's so simple, you can't put it into words. It's like, where are the words to describe something so simplistic?
Yeah, I love that you say it's so simple because I talk like sometimes, when you think about what is spirituality to each of us, right? And you
Hmm.
think about how do I get to that point where I'm like seeing my inner self or the divine or the universe or whatever we call it, right? And then
Right.
when you kind of explore religion and spirituality for a while, you study it, you get kind of introspective with yourself. You can say, oh, the distance between here and there is a short distance. But that doesn't
Yes.
mean that it's not extremely complicated, right? It can be a really
Hmm.
short distance and it can even be like a theoretically simple path,
Yep.
but it's actually pretty complicated to kind of navigate yourself through it.
Yes. But then also with a history of trauma, you have that self doubt and you're like, you get confused and you're like, did I really think that just now? Or did I change my mind? And then somebody will tell you something else and you're like, no, that seems more true. But then somebody will say contradictory, something completely different. And you're like, that sounds kind of true too, but I'm not sure. So it gets to a place where you're like, okay, so I'm just basically open at a door of this expanse of potential possibilities, none of which I can understand. And people hate it when I say this. I understand why they hate it. I really do. Like it's a frightening sort of feeling to admit you just don't know. You don't absolutely know 100%, but you have a perception in and of yourself that there's something. Something is there. So maybe you have a way of describing it that you feel fits your view of the world. But you know what? There's a funny thing that happened this morning. I've had such a bizarre day. I was telling you that before the show, but it's been just the craziest day. And this is my first live stream in years, by the way. So if I seem a little off, that's why,
Oh,
because
I'm
it's
glad you're
been
doing it.
so
I'm
long
glad you're
since
here.
I've done this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. But yeah, this morning I went to Chick-fil-A for breakfast. Right, this is actually a special thing for me. I don't go to Chick-fil-A for breakfast very often, and I really love their little their burritos. Right, so I go in there, and I've been walking for a long time in the heat because I've been running around all morning. And I get in there, and usually the employees there, and most of them are all very nice. They're like so sweet. And here in Las Vegas, where I live, it's a little different with the customer service. If you go to like one of the other places like McDonald's or something, they'll pretty much ignore you. They just won't even talk to you. They're like, here's your food. They don't say thanks. And I just kind of got used to that because that's just the way it is here in this city. So when I go to Chick-fil-A, it's like special, it's like, yay, I'm going to get customer service. Like, yay. So I go in there and I get this kid who's like he's probably only slightly older than my son who is just about to turn 18, right? So I get this kid who is just like and just like so rude, just incredibly rude to me, and the whole time I'm just like refused to give rude back, and I'm just like being nice to him. I'm like, yeah, thank you, displaying polite behavior, right? And he was just like, I don't know, like he hated being there. I was like, did your parents make you get this job and you're trying to get fired because you're not going to last a day doing this? But at first I was like angry. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so disrespectful, and I came here for this. And I was like, wait a minute, why do I feel this way? Why am I so upset? I mean, this is a kid, basically. I mean, to me, he's a kid. Like, why would I get upset about that for? So I just started thinking, maybe just seeing it really adjusts something in both of us, because later on, right before I left, I walked back over to get like some sauces or something, and he came up to the register again like he thought I was a new customer, right? And he was just like totally different, like really nice. Like I don't even know what to think about that. I'm like, what is happening here? So that's just like one of the many bizarre things. But if you think about it, if I'm looking at it from his side of things, I'm this kid with no life experience. He doesn't have my life experience. He has no idea. I've raised children. This is a kid who knows nothing about the world. This is probably his first day, because he was in training, right? So he's
Right.
being trained by this other guy. So, I'm sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, why would I expect him to see things from my perspective? Why would I think that he would have a lifetime of my history and my memories? And there's this thing, and I say it all the time. I love talking about this word, but there's a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows online. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't. I'm always
Okay,
looking
it's
for good
it's
books,
like
though.
made up words that have these really emotional backgrounds. So one of them is Sonder. It's Sonder, and it's basically the recognition that everyone is walking around with worlds inside of them. They're these big mysteries that you can't see anything but the surface. And they talk about the iceberg thing, but it's really, really true. You only see what's coming out of them. This kid could have been going through like crazy stuff, right? I have no idea what this kid's life was. I mean, maybe he didn't want to be there. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he was feeling terrible and he didn't feel like he could leave. There could have been a million things this kid was thinking. So if he's moving around with his worlds going around, why would I think that they have any real effect on my worlds? If they're not, directly impacting me, yeah, I'm going to have a knee jerk emotional reaction because I'm expecting something I didn't get. It's going to be disappointment. But at the same time, I can just sit with that emotion, just feel it and be like, huh, I don't have to do anything. And I think that's what happens sometimes in spirituality. I don't think that religion is bad per se. I think it's like any system. What happens is the system is supposed to serve the interests of the people. And instead, the people start serving the interests of the system, and that goes completely backwards.
Right.
And then, you end up with situations where people are looking at it like, okay, well, if I'm this, let's say I'm a Christian or a Catholic or whatever it is, whatever group that you affiliate with, and you say, okay, this other person is also a Christian or Catholic or whatever. So they must be good. Brain loves shortcuts. I mean, our brain loves to save energy. So
Yeah.
if it says, okay, well, I can group everybody in this category as good, safe, trustworthy people, it's going to be like, yeah, yay, saving energy. I don't have to sit there and analyze what they're doing and their behaviors and whether or not they're really, practicing what they preach. And it's just, this blanket aspect of, you know, feeling like everyone's on your side. And it's a double-edged sword because it can be a really good thing too, to have that connection. I've heard it even said that like music concerts, I'm really into metal, by the way. Like I love metal music. I'm crazy about it. And people are like, no way, you're like into psychology, you're a book nerd. And I'm like, no, I love metal. I'm crazy. You have no idea. But yeah, when you think about like metal concerts or any kind of music concert, it's similar to a church because you have everybody there for a common interest that they're very emotional about and they identify with. And that's a big thing, is that identity and that sense of belonging and that sense of
Right.
purpose, community, having people be there for you. And I definitely saw that
Oh,
in
yeah.
my community. So, what do you think about that?
No, I there's a couple of things there I really appreciate that you said. And that last thing you talked about, community is really important. I think people often think when they're on the spiritual path or an introspective path even, that it
Yeah.
has to be lonely or it's going to be lonely. But that's like a
Yeah.
choice, right? It doesn't have to be, I think. And we're very communal tribal beings, so we're better off usually if we find people that speak our language and know have a similar perception or open-mindedness that we have. Like we have similar thoughts and beliefs. We don't have to be in an echo chamber, but a place where we have some similar interests is usually helpful.
Right. Yeah.
And you talk a lot about perspective there. And when you were talking about that, and a couple of different times you talked about how perspective is so different in someone else, and we never know. We know what we're going through, kind of. Hopefully,
Yeah.
we know what we're going through. Sometimes we don't.
Sometimes we do, sometimes not.
But we don't know what someone else is going through, and I think a lot of times, and I think this is a good topic too, because we think that we know what someone's going through often. We know them, like we know what their story is, but we really don't. We really don't know what their story is. Like we might have a concept of it, we might have an idea of it, but we really don't understand how their life is being lived, and we don't understand what place they're coming from what trouble they're going through. and that they see things completely different than we do. I think it's so important to know that we're moving through this amazing world that's completely messed up but awesome. And we don't understand how differently people are seeing this experience. They're not seeing it like us.
Yes, that's so true. It's just like, I can't even imagine. It's like trying to imagine, what does a dog see? What does the world look like to someone else? And the only thing is, and I've asked this question, like, especially the people close to me, they probably get tired of hearing it. Like, what are you thinking about? What's in there? Who are you in there? What's happening inside you? Because even the people closest to us, we know from what is consistent about them,
Sure.
what they do on a regular basis, what is trustworthy. And that's really the only way that we can tell what might be happening inside them. And there are people who have had 30, actually, I've literally seen a 50-year relationship in which they did not know each other well enough to realize that one of them was going to leave after 50 years. Like, these are people I knew personally. I was very surprised because nobody was expecting it. And it was just very sudden.
You talked about how the brain and the ego and the brain together, they tend to oversimplify things on purpose because they think that is the easiest way to keep us alive, right? So you talked about how they oversimplify things, and that if we don't really analyze that ourselves and look at it more intentionally in a more aware way, then we're looking at things way more simply than we could. Because sometimes it's nice to be able to look at things in a simple way to make decisions and to kind of figure life out. But at some point, there is a certain degree of complexity to life. And if we don't recognize that our brain is like taking everything down to the lowest common denominator, we're really not in control of how we're perceiving and seeing the world around us.
Right. That's true. And then, have you heard of the reticular activating system, part of your
I have
brain?
not.
Okay, it's part of your brain and nervous system. Basically, it regulates. It's a very large system. It's not just like one thing. It's not one area of your brain. It's multiple systems working together to regulate your behaviors, basically your habits and behaviors. So we're kind of similar to computers in a way. If you repeat something enough, eventually you will program yourself with that thing. That includes your thought habits, not just physical habits. So whatever you're thinking and feeling on a regular basis. Now, here's a funny thing too, is that your synapses in your brain, your neurons that they fire, right? And they create activity in your brain. Well, if they fire together, if you do two things together, two activities at the same time, they will start firing together. If you keep doing it over and over again, they'll fire at the same time. So you do one, you're going to want to go do the other one, right? So they call it habit stacking. Basically, you'll take something, that you're already doing and then add something to it and, tie those together. But I think that also works in a sense with spirituality. I do think that it becomes a sort of mental and emotional habit. And that if you're trying to even consider breaking away from it, now this is twofold, because I think faith is a good thing. I think believing that you're protected and safe, that you have something, a higher power or something looking out for you, I think is a really, really good thing to feel secure and less anxiety and stress. But you also need to be careful to have boundaries and not assume that you don't have to monitor yourself within that faith structure, and monitor especially other people who you might interact with during that faith structure.
Yeah, I really like that. And boundaries are incredibly important. And going back to what you said in the very beginning too, like I think it is really important for people to understand my brain is a biomechanical machine and I am programming it. And I think we know we have habits, we know we have routines out in our life, but we don't realize that we have these internal habits and routines that are baked into the way that we programmed our thought processes. And like you said, that bleeds into spirituality, because we know that there is either some form of alignment or non-alignment, depending on our day and who it is, our alignment of our mind, body, and soul. And so that programming of our mind impacts our body, it impacts our spirit and soul and our whole life.
Now, it's funny that you mentioned alignment, because it made me think of something, is that also when people come together with these same ideas, they have these thing called thought forms, right? It's basically like a contagious idea. So, it's actually just really, really effective with certain ideas, especially if it also involves the emotional system, because the emotions actually come from the body. We feel emotions in our body. If we
Yeah.
refuse to feel them, we reject and won't listen to them, they get stuck in our body, and that
Yeah.
starts to build up, starts to build illness, whatever else. So I really think that things like meditation. So I would say meditation for no matter what faith you are. You could have meditative prayer, you could have
Right.
walking meditation, yoga. That I think is one of the most essential forms of connecting with yourself in that way, to check in with yourself and be like, okay, where am I in this? How do I feel about it? And let it be an evolving thing. It doesn't have to be static. It can grow as you grow and change as you change, and you don't even necessarily have to change like your faith or anything, but you're allowing yourself to develop. You're not keeping yourself stuck in one place.
Well, I think this actually sits on top of us talking about the programming of our brain, habits, and routines, because one of the things that meditation is really a ritual for yourself, and
Mm.
and all ritual is, for any guests that out there that think it's just a spiritual or religious, like, or a dogmatic thing, all ritual is a bridge from our concrete self here in this world to our spiritual side, to our other side. And and so I think meditation is one of those things, you it's almost like it's helping like cleanse your like brain, that hard drive. It's like helping like reformat it in a healthy sort of way. I think I might have lost you for a second. Welcome, Rose. Hello, ENT. Welcome to the stream. I think Chloe, we just lost her internet for just a second. She'll be back here in just a second, guys. She had a little interruption about 10 minutes ago.
Hey,
Welcome to
so
the
sorry about
stream.
that.
That's okay.
Thank
It's
you.
okay.
Sorry, my
Yeah.
internet's actually been fine up until now, but it is that time of day for me. It's like 5 p.m., so
Yeah.
everybody's on
Everybody
their
gets home on
internet.
the weekend and wants to Friday afternoon. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So
Absolutely.
everything gets all crazy. But yeah,
Yeah.
meditation and journaling together. You let the brain discover itself, and then you let it out, and then you're
Right.
not all crammed up with all these feelings.
Yeah. Not crammed up with all these feelings, and that's also what you were talking about. It's like these feelings get stuck inside of us, and I mean we know that, but it's
Hmm.
so important to talk about it out loud. And meditation's a part of making yourself more aware. Okay, this emotion is stuck here. This thought
Hmm.
or emotion or feeling is stuck here. And so I can meditate on it. I can
Yes.
write about it and journal it. And as you're journaling, whether you're journaling on paper or you can journal on your phone or your computer, you're channeling out that thought, that feeling, that emotion that is stuck, and you're
Hmm.
channeling it out of you. You're
Yes.
literally writing it away outside of you.
For me, I used to call it pulling thorns, because it would actually be just a sort of agonizing feeling, and then all of a sudden this huge relief, you know. So I'm just
Yeah.
like sitting with it. I'm like, okay, 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 everything's fine now. So it really took me a while to get in touch with my emotions, because where I grew up, people really didn't talk about their feelings. It was kind of seen as weak, pretty much. Um, like, you to discuss mental health issues, or to be under mental health care, it was seen as sort of like this general weakness or poor character, something like that. Like, something was not right with you, and maybe you might have to question your character or something. But unbelievably, there were so many mental health issues there, that they
Yeah.
did they did pull together in a community. And that's one thing I love about where I came from, is that I learned community from them, because it's very poor where I came from. They don't have a lot, so they have to share amongst themselves. They need each other to survive. So
Right.
there's a certain sort of uh, community and connection in needing each other. But I also think we need ourselves in that same way. I think we need our interconnection to ourselves, and
Yeah.
seeing ourselves as a viable person worthy of our own time.
Yeah. I think that comes up on our show almost every week, which is that
Or
our society, in a good way and in the best way, like not in exactly, we've kind of talked about it in different ways. You're coming at it from a different angle, but it's that idea that we're taught to take care of others. We're taught to always be outward focused, and
yes,
we're
we
very rarely taught to
sacrifice.
to love our whatever. Yeah, the hero complex. We're taught
Yes.
we're taught to love these heroes and have this idea of sacrifice, and
Yes.
no one
It's
ever
almost like,
says,
oh, you were injured, you got hurt because you were doing what you were told to do. Oh, good girl.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Like,
pretty much what it felt like.
yeah, so you'd never get that from our society that, oh, you need to turn inward and love yourself and take care of yourself first,
See yourself,
right?
witness yourself.
And
Yes.
that's often how we ended up so busted. It's
Yeah, I
because
agree.
we're out there not taking care of ourselves.
I think what's happening, and I understand it because I used to do the exact same thing, especially growing up. I mean, I probably did it all the way up until probably a couple years ago. Yeah, at least. That I would always try to change my external experience.
Right,
I gotta fix this, and I had to do it right now. Like it had to be done right now. It wasn't good
right.
enough for it to be 6 months from now. So, I try all these things and I try and fail. Or I do them for a while, maybe even a couple of years, and then it somehow just kind of fall apart. And I think I had to get to the point where I understood that I had to change what was inside of me, that you got to go
Yeah,
inside to change what's outside because everything's here. Everything, the world says yes to everything. So even our egos, like our ego is all about no, we think it's like, no, you can't do that.
yeah,
No, we don't
absolutely.
want to do that. But it's actually saying yes to staying in the same place because it feels safe. So it's really saying yes to not doing anything. So if you say, if you're saying no, that no, I'm not going to get up and I'm not going to go jog in the morning or something, you're basically saying yes, I'm going to suffer whatever consequences, and that's what I choose. But you're still making a choice. There's
Yeah,
still an element of
choice.
freedom and
Yeah,
choice.
yeah.
So, like
Choices
they
every
say
step
on
of
the
the way.
Matrix, the problem is choice. It's always the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, all the way down. It's choices all the way down.
Yes.
And that's powerful. When you seize that, you're like, oh, suddenly I have this power of choice. I can decide what's going to happen to me, and and you're when you it sounds complicated to like
Mhm.
maybe turn inward, but it actually makes life so much easier
It
because it's sort
does.
of you mentioned it just now at the start of that when you were just talking about trying to change everything around you, and
Yes.
you're trying to create this environment for yourself from the outside in instead of the inside out.
Exactly. You're
And
trying to fix something inside and make it
yeah,
feel better by changing what's outside, but it doesn't work that way
yeah,
because you can't change
you're
the outside
fighting,
really anyway.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you're going to meet all this resistance, trying to change the outside, and it's like trying to change your environment because you're trying to change some other reality, not your own. And
Yes.
whether that's an organization, whether that's nature, whether that's a person, we know most of us know from either reading or from watching television shows that trying to change other people is it doesn't
Impossible.
work out, but we do it
You
anyway. Then
can't do it.
we
Even
watch
if
our
they
TV show,
promise
we
you,
read our
and they
book.
will. Sometimes
Yeah,
they'll even do it in earnest. I promise, I'll change this. I promise.
they
And
won't.
they mean it in the moment. But the thing is, it's hard to change yourself. You expect
Yeah,
somebody else to change something they didn't even want to change in the first place.
yeah,
And to be, reasonable about it. Maybe they can, maybe, but at the same time, you gotta be accepting of people the way that they are in
right.
certain cases. Like maybe we can compromise. There's a difference between compromising, you know,
Yeah,
than trying to change who someone fundamentally is or what they want to be, their values, their beliefs, their temperament, their behaviors, things like that.
yeah,
So different than compromising and saying, okay, well, if you don't do this, then I won't do this or something like that.
absolutely.
But it's also, would you be that bothered by whatever it was? Because usually it's some small thing that's not very important. Would you be that bothered if you were more secure inside, if your core was solid? What the things happening outside of you, they're not occurring inside of you. They're on the other side. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So
Yeah, and
in that
that
way, they're
goes,
not
but
infiltrating. That's what a boundary is, I think,
yeah,
is the best way I could describe it in the most basic sense is they're there and I'm here. They're there and I'm here. So,
yeah,
you know, I think people get mistaken about boundaries too because they think, okay, boundary means I go tell somebody that they have to do what I say. Like, it doesn't work that way. A boundary says, I will do this if I am made uncomfortable by the situation, or if for some reason I can't meet my needs in this situation, I
right.
will take this action to protect myself. That is a boundary.
Right.
And also not getting enmeshed with either people or systems, whatever it is. Becoming enmeshed means when the system changes, you change, instead of, you have a solid inner core and having your confidence be real inside, your self-esteem,
Right.
your self-advocacy.
Yeah. Self-advocacy. I think advocating for yourself is so important. And
Yes.
I think when we create that boundary, though, sometimes I think we create a boundary and we think it's just for that person or that thing or that
Hmm.
object, but really that boundary is not just for them; it's also for us, right?
Yes, its boundaries really are for us. It's for us to protect ourselves, meet our needs, retain our own autonomy and identity, retain our core fundamentals, our
Right.
physical being even. And, in these families where they have generations, everybody gets mixed up in everybody else. So one person reacts, everybody reacts, right? Where, they have no, they don't have the tools, the mental tools to process their feelings. They don't have the resilience because there was none ever built. They had no idea. They'd had nothing to start with.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that, and I think when you talked about meditation and the fact that
Mhm.
you can use meditation, you can use journaling, and that you're communicating with your higher self. That gets into those stresses and anxieties that we have, and you've talked about at the end of that. I think you mentioned, and when you and I were talking before the show, like there's in some of the notes we were exchanging about self acceptance and non judgment.
Yes, yes. I think when you go inside, I mean, I think if you have high anxiety, you probably shouldn't be doing deep mindfulness practices because you're going to be heavily focusing on your anxiety.
Right.
But if you're just, doing some breath work, and I would say the simplest meditation to start with, because I know meditation can feel confusing. It's like, I
Yeah,
have to
for sure.
sit for an hour, but why do I have to sit for an hour? So you can meditate anytime, wherever
Yeah.
you are. I don't recommend doing it while driving or operating heavy machinery, just
No.
in case. But,
Right.
you can just stop for a minute and say, here's me. I'm here now, right here in this moment. What am I feeling? What's around me? What's going on?
Right.
And just check in. And even that check in could start building that relationship. And it becomes a sort of snowball effect. You start, literally building an internal relationship with yourself, and you start seeing all these parts of you didn't even know were there.
Right.
All these dreams or aspirations, sometimes even skills and talents, things that you repressed because you felt like maybe they wouldn't be accepted by other people. Yeah, I remember this girl like from years and years and years ago. She has beautiful voice, right? I'm a singer too, and I think I have an okay voice. She had a gorgeous voice. Like I just loved her voice so much. But she was like, yeah, I don't want to go sing in the church choir because it's going to make my sister feel bad because she'll be sad and she'll feel jealous. And I'm like, I just, it hurt me that nobody else was going to hear that because she was worried that somebody would feel bad about how well her talent was. And we can't think like that. People are going to feel the way that they feel. You can't
Yeah.
change that. You can't go out there trying to be everything for everyone. You'll basically destroy yourself. You won't
Yeah.
be anyone if you try to be what everyone
Yeah.
else wants. You won't be anyone, and you won't make anyone happy.
Well, that's a lot to track, right? When you start tracking, well, this
It
person likes
is.
this and this person doesn't like that, but so I need to do somewhere in the middle, or I gotta, change for this person and be different over here. When I'm, it starts to get. That's a lot of weight to carry around. It's a
It
lot
is. It
of
really
extra
is.
baggage, and if you do it over time, you think you've been doing it for years. That gets really heavy, and it keeps just getting.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely, Rose. That's enabling the sister. We don't need to enable people for sure. We need to.
Right. And what
Uh,
she needs is probably trying to give her some confidence tools and maybe find something you're really good at that
right.
you can, showcase or something.
Yeah,
But,
because
we
we're
don't.
we're all good at different things.
Exactly. And just because, somebody else is good at something doesn't mean you have to be that too. Maybe you can just enjoy it. You could just, be pleased that it's in the world, be grateful. But you definitely want to seek out your own strengths, I would say, as far as, self awareness and, uh, you know, growing even spiritually. Just look for where your strong points are. Are you very compassionate? Are you very in touch with yourself? What is your strong point that you can build more into, and maybe even help other people find a way to?
Yeah, and
'Cause
that goes back to community and like it, if you're walking a spiritual path, you're like, okay, I want to be more spiritual. First of all,
Mhm.
you got to figure out what that means to you, spirituality and all that. But like as you're walking the path, it's natural to come along the path and you see people, you meet people, and it's good to have conversations and broaden your horizons and open up your
Definitely. I
universal
actually
worldview.
love the conversations. Like when people are open and they're
Yeah.
comfortable. And, I'm very non judgmental when it comes to people's beliefs. Like you can tell me you believe in purple unicorns and, fairies dancing in your back garden. I'm like, you know what? Maybe they really see fairies. Maybe there really are fairies out there and I just can't see them. I don't know. I have no idea what somebody else's reality is or what is, and that's when people are like, well, I genuinely don't know. And when I say that, I say it from a deep sense of knowing my limitations as a physical being. I mean, I
Right.
have eyes that can only see in 2D, right? We actually
Right.
don't see in 3D. We see
No.
3D because of light and dark, right?
Right.
So I can't even see in the back of my head. There are animals that can see all the way around. So how much do I really know about anything? But that's the great thing because it will never stop being interesting. There will always
Sure.
be more to know, always be more to learn. So when I talk to people, I'm always trying to kind of visit their world and see what do they know? What do they know that I might want to take back to my world?
Yeah,
But then
that's what it's all
also,
about. Sharing,
yeah,
right? Yeah, sharing.
but being careful too that you don't take things back that you don't want. So, it goes back to
Well,
those
discernment's
thought forms.
important. Like, yeah, being
Yes,
able to say like this part I can use this
discernment
part,
definitely.
but I don't need to use this other part of that. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And that's why I think, you got to pick and choose because if you try to take any one faith as 100%, it can't be done. It's not
no,
feasible to 100% anything. But I think it's basically like guidelines. It's an
right.
outline, a structure that you can start with and develop yourself. And I do think there's a lot of benefits to having a sense of purpose and meaning. Although I think you can have that without it too. You know,
Yeah, no,
uh,
purpose comes from a lot of different places, right?
yeah, you can find
Yeah,
purpose elsewhere too. It doesn't have to be spirituality because I know atheists that they feel a very strong sense of purpose. They feel happy and you know, and at
well, I
one
mean,
time I was even like right there with them. Like, there's probably nothing, and then eventually I would move on and be like, there's got to be something. So go hunting again,
but I
start
mean,
looking again.
even if there was nothing, right? And
Mhm.
like you find your purpose and you're living your best life, that is almost spiritual, even if they don't, even
You know, there are
it.
miracles in the mundane. There really
So yeah,
are.
so I mean, that's almost spiritual. It's almost Zen.
Yeah,
You know, I
you know,
I have I have a deep appreciation for atheists. I don't like to argue with them because it gets a
my
little
brother
tedious
is
at
an
times. But
atheist, actually,
yeah,
and he would
so
love to debate with you.
but
Seriously, he loves to debate. He was in a debate team.
yeah,
So, yeah, he definitely has a lot to say on the subject.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but we've had a lot of those kind of conversations too, because we've developed in a kind of similar way, sort of questing, I guess, looking, trying to figure out where do we fit into this as far
yeah.
as that aspect of things.
I like that. Like the spiritual community Kishar that sponsors our channel here, our YouTube channel, and our everything that we do is basically built on the journey. Like it's all about the
Yeah.
journey. It's about that richness of the journey. Because like our society is so busy trying to get somewhere,
Hmm.
a goal, a place, or whatever. Like very rarely do we think to stop and just enjoy the everyday, the
It is.
mundane, if we can learn to accept all these things in our daily lives, if we can learn to accept where we're at, and the trip along the way, then there's some pretty cool stuff out there that we're missing
It is.
because we're so focused on the next thing that we
Right.
have to
The
do, that we have to
destination.
buy, that we have to get to, a goal, a promotion, or whatever it is.
Yeah, totally. And it is, the more that I practice gratitude, and it's been a couple of years since I started heavily practicing gratitude and, daily affirmations of, I'm just so grateful to be alive and breathing.
Yeah,
Hey, I can walk around and I'm not in pain. And, I can drink
amazing.
water that's clean. I have clean water that I can just get out of a faucet. And a lot of the things start to look miraculous in the mundane. And you're starting to think, isn't it cool that I'm even here at all? How did I even get here? But all of a sudden, I'm having this really cool, interesting experience where anything can happen. And I can kind of level up like it's a video game. I definitely think of life as a video game. Like I've heard that across the YouTube channels recently, but I heard it like years and years ago too.
No, I mean, I think life is a video game, right? Like
It's got to be. This is
if
so.
you if you understand that, like, what you put out in the universe comes back to you, and we know that it does, because we could go test that ourselves each day and smile or say something nice and see it come back to us. We can see it happen.
Right.
So we know it happens. So if you go live your life for a week thinking this is a video game and that what you put out into the video game and what you do that you're going to get back, then suddenly you can go prove that you literally control your reality. You literally control what's happening to you, around you, obviously deep from within,
Yes.
because you're putting this energy out that you get back. And we know energy exists. We know that we're made up of energy, and that we feed off the energy of other people. We feed off the energy of the place that we're at, the home that we're at, the car that we drive, the places that we visit, the friends that we keep. And we decide how we surround ourselves and with what energy we surround ourselves with.
That's true. And on that point, just thinking about, our interactions with other people and how we view them from a video game perspective. Like I've heard this on a lot of different YouTube channels. I can't remember the first one that I heard it on, but thinking of other people who are not in your main inner circle, who are not your dedicated core people, thinking a little bit more like NPC characters. They come over, they come over to you, they offer you a quest. You got to decide whether or not you want to take that quest. Is it in your best interest? Is it to your goal?
Right.
Will it serve your general purposes of your values and beliefs, or where you're going?
But that goes back to what you were talking about in the very beginning of the stream here, which is that guy at Chick-fil-A is just an NPC. So why let that NPC upset you? And you got to the heart of that. Like, why let this guy change my reality? Because then our realities get intertwined and then complicated things happen.
Yes, exactly. I was really proud of myself too, because not even that, I also identified the NPCs probably having NPC problems, like on that movie Free Guy.
Oh, it's a great movie.
If you got that movie.
Yeah, it's.
If you haven't seen Free Guy, definitely love it. Yeah. Ryan Reynolds, he's Ryan Reynolds, in that movie. Love
it's absolutely. That movie. It's a very spiritual movie, actually.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
But the way they're all like having their own experiences that the other characters, the real human player characters have no idea of and don't even think about. But the thing is, you can't intersect with everybody. We only have so much energy. We only have so much mental, physical, and emotional energy. So you can't overextend everything and still expect to be able to take care of yourself or get through your own goals.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Being intentional, being aware about where we're spending our energy, because you only have so much. So think of it like you have an allowance of energy each day that the universe gives you.
Yeah.
And each day you choose where to put that energy, whether it's relationships or at work or at hobbies or whatever, where your spiritual reflection time and meditation or whatever you're doing on that. And that's basically the amount of energy that you're basically going to have every day. Now, sometimes you get surges of energy. There's all types of stuff behind that, I think, depending on what modality that you practice or what spiritual construct you believe in or philosophy or religious. You might receive energy from other places, but in general, we have a finite amount of energy that we get to spend every day.
Right. And there's always somebody who needs something, but sometimes it is better to let them handle their stuff, themselves. Sometimes we're not doing things in the best interest of someone to give all of our energy when they're not putting in effort, and especially if it's not reciprocated. That's not good for not even just them. I would say it's not good for society, because I see a lot of this, especially over here, in the cities. There's a lot of this entitlement where people just kind of go around doing whatever they want, and they think, oh, nobody's going to say anything to me. Like, I think about, we were talking about the workers here and fast food workers. And I think they probably just deal with the worst people, just constantly complaining, or, no wonder they're just completely numb, and they probably are turning into zombies just so they don't have to deal with this horrible backlash of people, So
yeah.
I think it's that lack of self-awareness, that lack of understanding, not just how other people see you, but how to see you, how to
Right.
look at you in an objective, non-judgmental, but also correcting way. Does that make sense?
No, it's growth, right? That's like
Yeah.
that. That's being intentional and aware about yourself and saying, "What am I doing? What are And then you say, "This is good. This is not great. This is fine. It's kind of neutral," and you figure out how to do more of the good and do less of the bad. And
Hmm.
and in theory, you can replace the bad with good habits and good routines and have a higher chance of success. But it's about having that intention and awareness to be able to do that and not just think, I'm going to live my life and hope everything works out okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the reticular activating system, right, that runs you and everything. If you just go on autopilot, you do have an autopilot. Like, you ever
Yeah.
seen that movie Click? I love movies, by the way, so I keep
Yeah.
mentioning movies references. But
I love movies
where
too.
he goes, okay, so for those of you listening, Click, just a quick rundown. He's got this magical remote that basically sets his life for him, but it automates. So, and this is kind of how our brain works. So when you set up these habits and they automate, you start running on autopilot, and you'll basically just not be there unless you start noticing again, which is another reason why for meditation, introspection, some way of reconnecting with yourself, you'll just keep running on autopilot. Like, you'll basically be talking and saying the things that you normally do or repeating the things that you've heard from others. And that also leaves you open to manipulation by others. Leaves you
Right.
very open to, anybody can talk you into whatever if you don't know yourself. Somebody really, really smooth talker, they know what they're doing and they don't have any compassion or empathy. That's where those boundaries come in, and you got to really love yourself to the point that you are willing to put forth the effort to protect yourself, to grow,
Yeah.
and to be there for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to. I think people think it has to happen all at once. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
we've all had that moment where, like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to change my life. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to stop hanging out with this person because they're not good for me. And you try to do all that stuff at one time, and then disaster happens because you can't do all that stuff at one time. So the
Hmm.
thing is, it doesn't have to all happen at one time. You don't have to, like, look at this and say, I've got to do all of this at one time. You can incrementally, and I think this is important for our subject at hand, which is spirituality and mental health. Like, you
Hmm.
can integrate spirituality, see that intersection of mental health, and realize that you can take steps to living a healthier life of, like, personal growth, and that leads to more joy, less darkness, more light,
Yeah,
and you'll feel lighter, you'll feel better, but it doesn't have to
definitely.
happen all at once.
Right. But it's a lot, it's very freeing to let go of all those concerns. And I think that's a big part of it too, is learning that deep acceptance of not only yourself, but of the world, of people as they are, situations as they are, and trying to look at them from the perspective of, how can this work for me? What am I supposed to learn from this? you know, and not thinking that it's a commentary on who you are or whether or not you're good or bad, that it's not a commentary on whether or not your life is good or bad. Your life is always good, by the way, just in case you know that. I
Yes,
mean, it doesn't matter what's happening, it's always good that you're alive. I'm really happy you're alive, just telling you.
it's the best.
So, you know, it is, it's something. And I think about things like the intersection of science and mental health, because psychiatry isn't really a science per se, because we're looking into people's heads. Well, you can only go by what they're saying and doing, right?
Right.
It's not like you can just go in there and say, okay, I'm going to go see if this well dried up. You can't go check it. You have to see if it's correcting whatever behaviors are causing them severe distress or causing them to not be able to function in their lives, right?
Well,
Whatever it is that the problem is.
we know that humans are massively unreliable witnesses, even for
Yes.
themselves. Like, because you
Yes.
you go to a car accident, the police show up 10 minutes later and they're interviewing people, and if you interview 10 people, 10 people will have 10 different versions of what happened at that accident,
Yes. And part
and
of that
that's
is trauma too, because when you're
yeah,
having a traumatic event, your brain's memory shuts down.
exactly, and
Yep.
and 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 really, like, we we think, and that happens, and that's important because that's our perception of what happened to someone else that we saw, or even what
Yeah.
happened, but it happens. We misremember our
Mm-hmm.
own actions. Like, we start to lie to ourselves,
Yes.
We start to believe, like you were talking about, we believe the narrative we're being fed by somebody else. We're reading from a script that's not our own, which
Right.
is typically pretty average for people. That they're moving to the beat of someone else's drum most of the time.
Yes. Yep.
So
Pretty much. Yeah.
it's about taking yourself out of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's really it's about mindfulness too, and noticing when you're doing that, when you're kind of giving your power to someone else, giving authority to someone else. I think being sovereign in yourself, or being sovereign to your higher power, whatever you call it. I mean, you might say higher mind.
Yeah.
In psychiatry, they say super ego. That's, they're pretty much talking about that
Consciousness.
intermediary.
Yeah.
Yeah, consciousness, God, whatever you call it, whatever it is to you, connecting with that, helps you reinforce your values, your beliefs, and then it's not easy for someone else to come in and just take from you. It's kind of like having a moat, where
Yeah.
the drawbridge or something.
Right.
You only let certain people in to your drawbridge. You don't let questionable people into your castle, because they might trash it, they might take it, they might throw you out.
Right. Well, fear, right? Fear is a big, our mind feeds us a lot of information, but our base reptilian ego is always playing off of what it's afraid
Yes.
of, right?
Either, try to get away from the possibility of
Yeah.
the end demise, basically. And that's, so most of our functions are based around that. But addressing that fear, it requires embracing it. I think you really have to just fully embrace. It's okay to be afraid, but also it's okay to act. It's okay to move forward despite that feeling of fear. And what that does, it creates a witness inside of you that says, this is who I am. I am someone who moves forward despite being afraid. So even when I'm scared, I continue. And then
Right.
that becomes part of your identity. Do you see how powerful that can be for on the long term, especially
Absolutely.
as years go on?
Yeah, and
it's a major thing.
I think it is. It's about deciding to go out and live,
Mm-hmm.
and say, I know the fear's there. Like you have CPTSD, I have CPTSD. Like, I don't know what it is
Yeah.
like for you, but I know that I really prefer to be at home, and I
Yeah.
really don't want to be at a restaurant or a mall or a movie theater. But I make myself leave my house and I go out, and that's facing that fear. That's knowing that the fear is not real,
Yes.
and I haven't beat that feeling necessarily. It'll probably come back next time, or at some point, but
I know exactly
goes-
what you're talking about for that.
it goes back to reprogramming your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I also here, because we're talking about practical mental health, and just so everybody knows, we've talked about this on the show a little bit in the past, but we're reprogramming like neurons, right? But we're
Yes,
also
that's
reprogramming
exactly it.
biological devices like the amygdala and other parts of the brain, like
Not
you're
just
talking
that, but
about.
the physical part of the
Yeah,
brain literally
it-
changes shape.
Exactly. So it's actually physiological stuff
Yes.
that is changing literal shape. And so that's why mental health is so important to how we're moving through this world spiritually. Because as you and I've kind of been talking here, we haven't said the words completely, but like this is about being grounded. This is about being centered. This is about having a lifestyle that fits something that you can actually wake up and have good habits and have
Right.
and be well, and have this holistic wellness, which is one of your kind of things that you
Right,
one of the
yes.
modalities that you focus on is that overall holistic wellness.
Yes, and you were talking about letting it take time, letting the changes take time, and developing the habits slow. Don't try to do like a whole bunch at once, because your brain and body is just going to nope, and it's going to do everything it can to undermine you, because you've got like this little entity in your brain, right? Edgar Allan Poe actually called it the imp of perverse, right? The imp of the perverse. That's what it was.
Right.
And it's basically, it's your ego, but it's a part of your ego that is really negative. It is a negative part that's like doom and gloom, everything's terrible, nothing's ever going to work out,
Sure.
and basically it's trying to keep you immobile. It says, I'm keeping you alive because everything we've done so far, no matter how terrible it's been, we're still alive. So we should keep doing this. And you're like, no. And it's like, yes, But you can't change that unless you change it in small increments. So you kind of push it a little bit and you coax it along. You don't force, because if you start forcing, you're going to get resistant. But if you
Right.
coax, like it's a little kid or a pet, like training a pet, you know, I know that sounds really weird talking about my brain like it's a pet, but it's kind of a similar sort of thing. You're kind of making friends with it, saying, hey, this is safe, it's okay, and actually it's fun. And I was going to ask you about that. When you go out, when you make yourself go out, do you
Right.
enjoy it once you're out?
Typically, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually
Yeah.
do too. And I'll feel like in
Usually.
the morning, I don't want to go out, but I've been doing it every day for like 4 years now. So, it's changed my thinking about it. So even if I wake up and every once in a while I'll have like a back sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of like some old version of myself going, I don't want to go out. Let's watch TV. I'm like putting my shoes on. And it's like, I don't want to go out. And I'm going out the door with my keys. I'm not really listening. And then
Yeah.
once I get out there, I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. Oh, look, these flowers are blooming. And then all of a sudden I'm happy, and I want to be outside. So I think it's the doing of it. Eventually it becomes a thing, especially when you get the dopamine, the good dopamine. You don't want the cheap dopamine,
No, you want
because
the good stuff.
you
Yeah.
want the good stuff. And the good stuff comes from the achieving of goals, the attaining
Yeah.
of the next level. And that's why we talk about the journey. And it's so funny you say the journey, because on Threads, we're doing June Journey this month with my group. So
I like it.
this is like so perfectly aligned.
I love
But
it.
it really is. You got to enjoy getting to the next level, and that's where you get that dopamine hit. That makes you want to go forward to the next level. So even when it's hard, and even when it hurts, you remember back. Oh man, that was really good. Let me do it again. Let me get to the next one. And then when you start getting in the higher levels, that's when it really starts getting fun.
Yeah. I love that you talk about that progress and like you start out and then it builds. And
Hmm.
I think, we talk a lot about starting the journey and starting that journey of 1,000 steps. You got to take that first step, right? But
Right.
the everything behind after that, you've got to take the next step and you've got to take the step after that. And you have to have a little bit of faith in yourself that if you keep taking these steps, good things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And you don't have to blindly commit to something and say I'm going to do this indefinitely, but do it for a while, see if it works. Like you were talking about meditation or journaling or whatever it is that you decide that you want to do, that is going to be something that's kind of practical to help you kind of move along the path.
Mhm.
Give it a shot. Don't just do it once or twice. Do it several times and see what happens
Yes.
as you do it.
Because you might not like it the first time, but you might start to realize the benefits, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I want to keep doing this. Or you might find that it's not working for you, and it's okay. It's just like with boundaries too. You want to be flexible about changing as
Yeah.
you change, because you're not going to be the same you in 5 minutes. You're
No.
changing right now. So you got to adapt and move with it. And that's what I think they call flow, as
Right.
you're moving with it. You're going with the flow. You're just saying, okay, this is what it is right now at this moment, and I'm just going to deal with it the way it is. Then you start using a different part of your brain than if you were trying to resist it. You start using that thinking, you know, clarity part that starts making sense of things. And, that happens in, people who, uh, let's see how to say this so YouTube algorithm doesn't get mad. People who self medicate,
Right.
they actually were talking about the structure of the brain. Eventually, what it does is no matter what that, addictive self medication is, whatever it is, just starts to diminish the prefrontal lobe of the brain, which means
Right.
they have trouble making decisions, clear decisions, or thinking of things in a rational sense. It's a trap. It's a really bad trap, because once that starts, it's really hard to reverse. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. And lots of people have success, but it's really hard. That's why when you start down that road, you basically are developing maladaptive patterns to dealing with the situation. Probably because you didn't have the tools, and it's probably not your fault. But once you know, then it's your responsibility to heal. Once you know, but it's not your fault when you don't know.
No, and that's a great point, right? Like we all kind of go through parts of our life where we didn't have the tools we needed to live the life that we could or should or maybe needed to have lived. And
Yes.
so once we get to a point where we have a realization where, oh, okay, I kind of figured that out a little bit, then suddenly you do have the responsibility to say, what am
Yes.
I going to do now? And and there's a lot of work there because you've got to one be where you're at, which can be difficult, acceptance of where you're at. You have to let go of the past.
Yes,
And then
the
you have to
past version of
suddenly,
you, which will cling. It'll want to stay.
oh,
It'll be like, don't leave me behind. Don't
it's the
leave me here.
cleaniest thing. Our past
Oh,
self is the cleaniest thing, and it comes back. You'll let go. You'll get rid of it, and be like,
yep,
it will just. You'll turn back around one day, and it'll
exactly.
right be right there, and then you also, as you're accepting your present situation, you also have to not be worried about the future, because the future is it doesn't exist, and
I
it
always
will
think
never
of the
it will
future
actually
like,
never exist.
yeah, yeah, true. I always think of the future like the best laid plans of mice and men. You can do
Yeah,
everything right, and it's still not within your control. It is not your say what's going to happen specifically. Now,
right.
it is your say to get back up and to get knocked down, because failure is quitting. To fall
Yeah,
down is wonderful because now you know what doesn't work. Now you know this
right.
isn't what's working, so let me try something else. And I mean, if I think about when the Industrial Revolution and things were going on and the technology that we have now in like 100 years, right? Just the development of that technology and how many failures they had to have. Now, I used to be a technical instructor, right? So I get how this process goes, the failures and the failures and the failures, right? So just how many times they had to fall down and get back up for us to have a cell phone, you
Right.
know, for us to have tiny little computer chips and an entire network that connects the whole world. It's incredible, by the way. But, you know,
Yeah.
just the idea of what it took, the tenacity, you know, when you start looking at that perspective, you start realizing as a human being, we are incredible innovators when it comes to progress. Incredible innovators, even as individuals. We have so much ability to adjust ourselves, much more
Oh
than
yeah.
any other animal that has ever been that I can even think of. I mean, animals can do some interesting things with themselves, but as far as what our brain and how we see the world and how we think and how we perceive, and creating entirely new habit systems or maybe even entirely new communities if we need to, the fact that we can adapt and change is so amazing. And it always makes me think of the structures. They have these concepts, these maps of the universe that look like a
Hmm.
brain. They basically shape like a brain.
Hmm.
And I think about that, and I talked about the neurons out, earlier, how the neurons fire together, but they can be in totally separate parts of the brain, and they will fire at the same time, having no connection to each other, by the way. So they will just do it at the same time because that's what it's become. And that makes me think of that superposition, and how these particles fire together across millennia in the universe. And then I'm like, yeah, this has to be something, this has to just be some amazing experience that we're having, because it's too perfect. It's so perfect in a way. And people are like, the world is horrible. I'm like, if I think back
It's
to
not.
history, and I'm a big history buff, so
Sure.
I'm
Same.
like, I remember a time when people didn't even care about human rights. There was not even a thing about
Right.
human rights. They're like, yeah, kill everybody, yay. And now we actually care about each other's feelings and we're talking about our emotions openly. I think it's incredible that we've progressed to this point.
Well,
I think that I see us going in the right direction.
I love this because, and it's so important in mental. This is really important conversation for mental health. This right here, because there's so many doomers out there that are like, oh, well, we're doomed, and I believe in science. Like, I mean, like take something like whatever it is out there, we're probably going to be okay. Humans are pretty resilient.
Yeah.
We're pretty amazing, and just the fact that you and I can communicate across space and time
Hmm.
over the internet and have this conversation on social media, it's proof of the amazing advancements we made, how safe we are, how healthy we are.
Yeah.
It also proves that you're able to use social media in a healthy way. Like as you and I are talking, this
Hmm.
can be seen if someone chooses on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, wherever, and that's
Right.
pretty amazing. We choose what we consume. We choose where we put our energy out. Like you and I are putting our energy out right now
Hmm.
into the world, talking to each other, having a great conversation, hoping that someone out there finds it helpful.
And that's what I'm passionate about is
Yeah.
the giving people the tools. Like you said earlier, they don't have the tools. So I really want to give them the best tools that I know work. And I'm actually grateful for the experiences that I had, as difficult as they were, because how else would I know? How I could never have any comprehension of it, not having lived it.
Right.
So how would I be able to develop tools? It's like the doctor, the surgeon who's never had surgery or something. But I mean, yeah, obviously they can have surgery, but
You're right.
it, there's no way that I could get the deeper insights without living those things. And it gives it a different perspective. It sees it from a different angle, and it gives it a different meaning in my mind. So it also
Right.
gives me a different meaning about myself and my progress and where I've come from. So people are like, well, don't you hate your parents? I'm like, no, they're just people. They were people, and I'm sure that I made dozens of mistakes raising my own kids. I'm
Right.
sure that I was not perfect, but they did what they could with what they had.
Right.
They were operating with what they had. And I think because especially, and this is a thing about spirituality and religion too, which religion is like a whole separate thing. That's like a human thing to me. I think if I were to say spirituality is like the most basic things that are not human, the awareness, the consciousness, the most basic of energy in the universe is
Right.
probably what I think of as spirituality, which I don't label, by the way. I don't have any labels specifically because I don't want to apply them to my identity, and I want to be
Right.
very open to other people's ideas and their perspectives. So, and I think that it's not impossible with a label. Absolutely, you can still be open, and
Sure.
but I just think it makes it easier for me personally to not have those labels and to be very flexible about my beliefs and let them change as they go.
Yeah, I think we very much overlap in that. I mean, I call myself a universalist or omnist, which basically means I believe in everything. So
Yeah, the omnis,
because
I've used that one before.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm an omnist is the main one I use, and people haven't heard it very often, so I call myself a universalist, so people will kind of have a reference point. But
Oh,
yeah,
gotcha. Yeah,
but I
that
very
makes
much feel
sense.
I'm an omnist. So
Yeah, I mean, there's
I'm
truth in everything. It's just
yeah,
you got to get to the truth, and that truth part is fundamental. It's the
yeah,
it's
for
the
each
basic
person.
truth of everything. Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
every
and
person has that truth.
yeah, exactly. I think that's the beauty of spirituality. That's the beauty of self exploration and introspection is that you kind of end up in this place where you were meant to be,
Mm-hmm.
where everything just makes sense. Life is easier. You're happier. You're in your purpose or dharma and all of that, and things just kind of flow. You're flowing with the
Yeah,
universe, and I think we can all get there. I mean, that's what this
I
this
believe
podcast,
it.
this show's all about.
I
Is
believe that we can. Yeah, and I think
yeah,
I don't think it matters how long it takes. I know we want to get there, but this is a wonderful process to see. I mean, from watching from when I was young and the development of everything, especially the mental health tools that are available now. I mean, they're so much better than they were. Trust me, so much better. And the comprehension of what is good for people on a mental and emotional level has really improved. I mean, it's not perfect. Obviously, you've got a lot to do, but you know,
no. I mean,
the
even
progress is there.
like when we were at war back in the day, like my unit was one of the most deployed units in the U.S. military after 9/11, and I think we had people in like 22 different countries at one point, and
Mm,
a lot of mental health problems. But we all had top
yes.
secret security clearances, and so back then, this is like 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005,
Yeah.
between Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else,
Yeah.
we weren't allowed to go seek mental health because we would lose our clearance. And
Oh,
they've changed that now. Like, but they didn't. They only changed that fairly recently, where you could actually go seek mental health and still maintain your top secret
yeah.
security clearance. So, I mean, it's even in something like the military, U.S. military, which is pretty rigid.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're starting to see the utility in it. Which I think if the U.S. military can see that, then we know that society is probably moving in the right direction.
I'm really hoping that it is because I think what we need is, like I said, a return to a system that is serving the individual. It's not going to serve every single individual, obviously. There's always going to be a little bit of marginalization, but I think at some point we could nearly eradicate it,
Yeah.
if we just learn to help people help themselves,
Yeah.
learn how to manage ourselves, how to be there for ourselves, you know, how to use each other correctly. Sometimes I think people don't abuse each other so much as misuse each other. You're my
Yeah.
security blanket. No, that is not what that person is for. The person, maybe they do give you comfort and security, but if you can't leave the house without them, this is a problem.
Right.
You're
Yeah. It's
starting to run into
it's enabling, just like we
enmeshment
were talking about
territory.
earlier. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's about like we can teach spirituality and mental health both at a younger age for people to kind of have that approach to it and be open with it. And we're making some strides there. So
Yes, definitely.
yeah.
And I really think that the mental health tools are extremely important for young people. Like I homeschooled my son, who's autistic. So I took him out in third grade because he just didn't fit into the school system, and he just did so much better once I had him at home. So he went into Boy Scouts for his socialization and stuff.
Right.
So he's going to be Eagle Scout soon. So I'm really excited about that
Oh, congrats.
because
That's
it's
awesome.
like, yeah, it's actually a really really major achievement. So
Yeah.
but with him growing up and stuff, a lot of the things that I tried to teach him was how to feel secure about yourself, even if other people don't like you.
Yeah.
Even if other people are mean to you, how to how to be the bigger person, sort of. I guess that's how I could say it. Is it's how to be, have the integrity in yourself without letting them trigger you or affect you. And he has something of my temperament, which that's my karma. Oh, it's fun, love it.
Sure.
But no, he's great. He's very smart, and just he's got that sort of willfulness I just really love, because he won't let anybody push him around. He's like, no, if I want to do it, then I will do it. If I don't want to do it, I will not do it. But he's still very responsible. So if he weren't, then that would be a problem.
Sure.
But teaching him that you have to look to yourself. Like I'll even tell him, I understand that you see me as your mom. I brought you into the world. I showed you around. I was your first contact point for this physical plane, but you have to learn to trust yourself, because only you know you. I will never know you like you know you. Only you know the inside of you as well as anyone ever will.
Right.
No one will know the depths of you. So it's really important for you to explore them, to know them, and to be
No,
true to them.
that's great. That yeah, and that's not done a lot. I don't think like that
Mhm.
idea is that introspective thought is not taught much. I don't think.
No. But in my workplace, I used to work at a web hosting company. I was a technical trainer, and we did start something like very shortly after I got into the technical training department. This was just the two of us, and it was tech support and web hosting and web design and things like that. Well, I was mostly over the technical support people. That is an incredibly stressful job, and will seriously damage your mental health if you're not careful. And the jobs that we were doing is, think about, if you have, they've actually changed it now, partly because of some of the systems I put in. I'm very proud of myself for that. But they made some changes to the way the system is working, because we had like four chats, like chat, where you're typing in a chat, right? And then we would have a phone call at the same time as doing an email. So we had to do at least one email per hour while doing four chats consistently, four chats and a phone call at the same time, having conversations about people fixing their websites or their web hosting.
Right.
And we had to do it in under 10 minutes, was ideally what it was, right? So they've
Right.
made a lot of changes. You can imagine how incredibly stressful that is to do that for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. That's incredibly crushing on your mind and body. I mean, I gained tons of weight at that job. Like I really did. It was so stressful. Like, unfortunately, they also had really great food and snacks there, of course.
Right.
But I lost the weight later, so that's fine. But you know, the things that people go through when I started reviewing with them their contacts and stuff, because that was part of my job, is to do monthly reviews with each person and say how their contacts were going, and you know uh, talk to them about the ways they can improve. I would always ask them, how are you doing? How are you feeling about the job? How do you feel about the work? It's keeping you up at night.
Right.
Is everything okay? What would make this better?
Right.
What would make this an easier job where it's less stressful? And I just, every single one of them, and most of the time it was fewer contacts at the same time, fewer contacts at the same time. So they eventually did do fewer contacts at the same time, which actually improved the quality of the calls, because multitasking is not a real thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
multitask. Yeah, that's a really important point. Multitasking doesn't exist, right? It's
No,
not
no,
something
you're
that.
switching between tasks really, really fast,
Yeah.
which means you're losing quality every time. So I might get on a call with somebody that I was talking about their website, and the next one I'm like, hey, what about your email? They're like, no, you were talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
So
think that's really important that we just do the thing that we're doing and then move on to the next thing. And
yes,
we're so much more productive if we. And that's a valuable life lesson, like not just for work, but just like how we
it
process
is.
our daily lives. Like
Yeah.
don't multitask. Do your thing. Do the next thing. Do the next thing.
And I think a mental health program in every workplace. I mean, I would love to see it be mandatory, to be honest, in every place, just even a simple mental health program. Something
Yeah.
to say, here's some ways to improve your mental health in this job.
Right.
Can you imagine what
Well,
that might do?
I mean, we'd see productivity go up. We'd see
It's
people higher
huge,
job
huge.
satisfaction, and
Yes.
people leaving jobs less often.
Mm.
Yeah, it would probably lead to all kinds of, and that's why I think a national discussion on mental health is so important,
Yeah,
so that we can move this forward and people can get the help that they need, and that would honestly help our whole society, our whole culture. So
definitely.
as we've been talking today, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you think we should touch on?
There is something that I think is kind of magical, even though I tend to be very much a skeptic. I'm always questioning. Like, if somebody says something supernatural, I'm like, okay, here's a million reasons why it could be just some mundane thing. But the idea of synchronicities, especially thought synchronicities. I read this book, Big Magic, by Elizabeth Gilbert. She's the same woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love,
Yeah,
but she wrote this one called Big Magic, Getting Over Creative Fear, something like that. I can't remember the exact title. But it's talking about how creative ideas are like these thought forms that are floating around looking for somebody to make them real, right? So she was saying how sometimes she'd get
I
these
love
book
that.
ideas, and if she didn't take them down and didn't do anything about them, they would go on to somebody else, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then she would see that book come out later on. She's like, I had that idea. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's happened to me. So I really do think that we are so connected in a way that we can literally transmit thoughts out there if enough of us are doing that. And I really see just like so much evidence of that all the time. And people are like, oh, it's just a coincidence. I'm like, how many coincidences? I actually know kind of, the statistics and things, probability. I have some sense of what probability could be. And I'm thinking about some of these instances. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, I can't directly measure the probability, but that's like way coincidence, because it's so specific. It's like
Right.
really specific. So, and it's like the journey thing. We've been talking about the journey, and I know, in self help, you talk about the journey a lot, but it's like specifically something that's been coming up in the community, and it's almost like the community catches those waves too. And I've noticed that
Right.
I'll see like, it's not just people reading each other's posts. I'll see it like way a whole other platform, and it's like in the same time period, like the same day or the same hour.
Right.
And I'll see these same ideas all day long, and I like. I really wonder if these ideas are just running around looking for people to make them into reality. Like, I'm bored, make me real, make me a real boy,
Right. No, I
like
love that.
Pinocchio.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love the idea that we're all connected to this oneness of the universe. That we're definitely having our own human experience separate from everybody else, but like we're all connected back to this source, and it speaks in like vibrations that come out, and sometimes we process similar vibrations in similar ways.
Yeah, and sorry, excuse me. Let me get some water.
Sure.
Yeah. So, sorry, excuse me. I have a frog in my
No,
throat.
no, that's all right. I know how that goes. But yeah, I think the synchronicities. I mean, I believe when a synchronicity happens, it's probably the universe communicating something to us.
I think so too, and it's funny because I see them a lot, and I've seen them for years, and I have no idea like what they are. I can't explain it. It's
Right.
so in my face, and sometimes I wonder if it's so in my face because I'm such a skeptic. It's like, no, I have to be like really literal with you. Like, I'll find a note on the ground. I've had this twice. Twice I found a note, handwritten note on the ground telling me something.
Right.
about what I was thinking about, literally about what I was thinking about. What is happening? So I don't have explanations for everything. I don't know what it is. uh, I don't have a real name, but I don't mind not knowing. In fact, I kind of like not knowing because I can explore in that way. It doesn't have to be absolute in that way too. I think the universe is always saying yes. And I think in that connection
Yeah,
that you were
absolutely.
talking about with each other, I think that's where a lot of our empathy and compassion comes from, is
Sure.
in recognizing the connection that
Yeah.
we're all in this together.
Yeah, because if we're all connected to the universal source of oneness or whatever, however you see it,
Mm,
then that's compassion for ourselves and each other. Like it's the same thing. It's very much like this like beautiful bridge between each of us. I think.
yeah, definitely. And I think we can reinforce that too by just being, not just honest with people that we're comfortable trusting, with our beliefs, but also, just being respectful of each other, and letting each other, holding space for each other in that sense. What do you believe? How do you feel about it? How do you feel about this existence? What do you think about this life?
Yeah.
And for it to be okay for us to have different ideas about what that might be. I
Yeah.
think that it's completely, I don't even just think it's okay. I think it's wonderful that we have different ideas, that we have so much variety of ideas and perspectives to pull from. I would think it would be just hell to have a world full of people who are all the same, just all doing like the
Oh God.
same
Yeah.
automatons, look the same, think the same. It
Yeah.
would just be like a nightmare for me.
Yeah.
Be
No.
like, get
No.
me
Thank
out
you.
of here.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, celebrate our differences and embrace it, and then appreciate the similarities that we have because we all have so much in common as well, which is nice. So it's nice to be able to see both sides of that coin, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Okay.
So yeah, just saving off. I mean, I think the most important thing too is, using the spiritual tools and being mindful of your mental health at the same time. You know,
Right.
and there are lots. There's breath work. I mean, I think prayer has a lot of benefits. Studies even show that it has a lot of benefits for self
Yeah.
soothing, for self connection. Um,
Right.
it just depends on what speaks to you, what's what feels right to you, and what benefits you in a way that you're moving forward and happier with your life and in the direction that you want to go. I think it's
Yeah, and
being
that's
honest about that
yeah,
direction.
and that's absolutely being honest with yourself and looking at all these tools and modalities that are out there in different spiritual philosophies, religions, however you want to look at it, and what works for you, what speaks to you. Because
Yeah,
there's so much out there. It's about exploring it and saying, "Ah, this makes sense to me." Because this over
yeah,
here doesn't make sense, but this does make sense. So okay, go with that. It's okay.
exactly.
And maybe it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but not so much these other two or three things over there. That's fine too.
Right.
You can mix and match. It's allowed.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody ever tell you guys out there that it has to be one or the other because it doesn't.
No, no, and that's the thing with labels too, is like, we all have these words, and a lot of the time we're talking about the same thing, but using different words, and it gets
Yeah, absolutely.
confusing, because it's hard to articulate something that's so fundamental and basic,
Yeah.
and, it's not attached to anything else,
Yeah.
but except for us, of course.
Yes, for sure. No, I 100%. And
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the best lessons out there.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep researching and just keep looking for ways to help people, improve their mental health, and find a way to make their life feel better. Yeah, I want to see a world full of people who are like smiling when they walk down the road. I get
Same.
really happy about seeing people smile to themselves. If I'm
Same.
just like watching them, I'm like, yay, somebody's happy about something. I don't even
Yeah.
know what it is, but I'm like excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
So
it's been great to get to know you, and I know that
thanks, John.
my wife has met you a lot,
Hi,
and you guys have
Susie.
interacted a lot over on Threads,
Hi, Esco. Thanks for coming.
and so we're gonna put up your link, and if you want to tell us a little bit about that and anything else that you want the audience to know, the floor is absolutely yours.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure. I'm starting up the newsletter again, so it's going to be at methodmuse.beehive.com. I'm going to post the link over there. So I
Okay.
am going to be setting up a free self care. Now you're going to actually have an email that has like a self care kit, but I'm going to be setting up a free self care course that's going to be coming out
Okay.
soon. So
Awesome.
definitely sign up for that newsletter if you want to get that. And then later, I'm going to be doing some courses on things like boundaries and self-awareness, building self-awareness and mindfulness, building the daily practices, where to start, how to start off and actually get some progress, especially once you get to the middle, because that always seems to be the problem area, right?
Yeah,
You get to the
for
middle and
sure.
you're like, oh, I hate this. Why aren't at the
Yeah.
end yet? So, and it's like you
Yeah.
said, enjoying the journey. And it's not always easy to find the things that are enjoyable about it. But if you look, there's always something. There's always something there.
Yeah,
Always something to be
absolutely.
grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the themes that you've been mentioning kind of throughout this stream is your gratitude practice. You mentioned it a couple of times. I love
Hmm.
gratitude so much. It changes your whole life, guys.
It
Anybody out there
does.
that's
It
not
is
practicing
life
gratitude,
changing.
yeah,
Yes.
it's the best. It really is the best because then you're
And it's
thankful
so
for all this
simple.
stuff that you have, like inside and outside, within and without.
Yes.
Yeah,
And that makes a difference between, you can feel like you're really rich even if you have nothing. You
yeah,
don't have, like, right now I don't have a car just because I don't have a car. I live in a city where I don't have to have a car, so
right,
I'm on foot. I'm a pedestrian, which
yeah,
is new for me. I haven't done this since I was a teenager. It's very outside of the comfort zone, but I love it now. I'm like, hey, I'm a pedestrian. So when I first started, I did not love it. I hated it, especially summer in Vegas. Yeah, I was not a happy camper at first, but every time I would find a reason to be happy about it and say, at least I made some progress. At least I did it. Even if that was the only thing to be grateful for. But when you look at it that way, I mean, I know people who have tons of money and they feel like they're poor. Like there's never enough. There's never enough money. They have everything and it doesn't feel, they're like, no, something's missing because it's in you. It's not outside. You
yeah,
can't get what you're looking for outside of you. You can give it to yourself. It
right.
is there available for you if you can learn how.
Yeah, and I
So,
think if anybody takes anything else away from this conversation, I think that's it. It's there.
yeah,
It's always there,
it's
and
always there.
uh, it's gonna be there. And so be patient with yourself. Take time.
Mm.
Grandma Julie said, "Thank us both for the conversation." Thank you, Julie.
Oh,
We
thank you.
appreciate that, and thank you so much for coming on. Like,
Oh, sure. Thanks so much.
it's been a
It's
great
really fun. It's
conversation.
been a great conversation. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
really enjoyed it. I haven't done it in a long time. This is actually outside of my comfort zone. So it's been probably, I don't know, like 7 years, something like
It
that. Like a
it's good to get
really
back
long
out there,
time.
right? It's good.
It
It's good
is. It
to
is. And I
go.
actually forgot
Yeah,
how much fun it is.
yeah. It is. It is fun.
But yeah, I really appreciate you having me.
Everybody remember to check Method Muse out at methodmuse.beehive.com. The link is on the screen. It'll be in the description of the permanent show. Uh, we're gonna have a show next week at 7 Central on Friday, as same as every week. We're gonna be talking to a guest that's talking about channeling the Ascended Masters. Should be an interesting conversation. And Chloe, if you want to just stick around for just a second, we'll close
Sure.
down the live stream and say goodbye off screen. And then everybody else, you guys have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.